knew the company was finished the moment Brandon Coleman walked through those glass doors with his $300 haircut and that smirk that screamed MBA knows better. Not when the quarterly reports looked like a crime scene, not when they replaced the decent break room coffee with some organic nonsense that tasted like disappointment mixed with false hope. It was that exact moment when this 26-year-old kid strolled into our conference room like he owned the place. My name is Michael Hayes. I'm 48, been building and fixing systems since before this kid knew what a computer was, and I should have seen this disaster coming from a mile away. Brandon was our new CTO, fresh out of some fancy business school where they apparently teach you that experience is just another word for outdated. He'd probably never touched actual hardware in his life, never spent a weekend in a server room fixing what broke while everyone else was at barbecues and birthday parties. He walked into that conference room like Alexander the Great, except instead of conquering Persia, he was just intimidating a bunch of tired engineers who'd been keeping the lights on for years while management took credit for the electricity. I was sitting in my usual corner spot, nursing lukewarm coffee from a mug my 15-year-old son Jordan gave me for Father's Day 3 years ago. It had a cartoon wrench on it and said, "World's Greatest Fix-It, Dad." Jordan played baseball now, serious enough that college scouts were starting to notice, and I'd missed more games than I cared to admit because some server decided to have a meltdown during the 7th inning. But that mug reminded me why I did this job every day. Watching Brandon survey the room like he was planning a hostile takeover, I thought about my 17-year-old daughter Ashley, who'd gotten her Stanford acceptance letter just last month. We'd celebrated at Red Lobster, her choice, not mine, and she'd shown me the tuition numbers. Made my eyes water more than the overpriced shrimp. That acceptance letter was sitting on our refrigerator right now, held up by a magnet from our last family vacation to Yellowstone, back when I still believed corporate loyalty meant something. 15 years I'd been at this company. Started here in 2009 when everything was falling apart, when the financial crisis had half the country's businesses circling the drain. I'd come in as a contractor initially, fresh off a stint at a defense contractor where I'd learned that government bureaucracy made corporate politics look like kindergarten. The difference was, back then I was 33 and hungry, willing to work 90-hour weeks to prove myself. Now I was just tired, but I was good at what I did. My wife Jennifer, she'd been patient through all those late nights and weekend calls. She's a nurse at the county hospital, works the ICU, so she understands the weight of keeping critical systems running. When people's lives depend on your work, you don't get to half-ass it. That's something she and I both knew, but something guys like Brandon would never understand. In tech years, 15 years makes me a dinosaur. I'm the ghost in the machine, the guy who keeps the servers from melting down when Black Friday hits and everyone's ordering everything at once. I'm the reason the automated systems don't spontaneously combust when holiday traffic slams our networks like a freight train. But to Brandon, I was just another line item on the budget that needed optimizing. "All right, team," Brandon started, clapping his hands together like some motivational speaker at a pyramid scheme convention. "I've been reviewing our infrastructure, and honestly, it's holding us back. We need to pivot to a cloud-native, AI-enhanced ecosystem by Q4. He clicked to his slide, some meaningless diagram of boxes and arrows that looked like a kid's drawing of how the internet works. The colors were all wrong, too. You could tell it came straight from some template he'd downloaded, probably while sitting in his Tesla during lunch break. I squinted at his presentation. This genius was proposing to delete the central processing core of our entire logistics system. That outdated infrastructure he was dismissing with such casual arrogance? That was Vertex Core. That was my baby. That was the system I'd built back in 2009 during the supply chain crisis, working those 90-hour weeks I mentioned, fueled by energy drinks and pure stubbornness. While Jennifer was pregnant with Jordan. People forget how bad 2009 was. Lehman Brothers had just collapsed, credit was frozen, and companies were dropping like flies. Our company, Vertex Corporation back then before the rebranding, was maybe 6 weeks from bankruptcy. Vendors wouldn't ship without cash up front, customers were defaulting on payments, and our existing system couldn't handle the chaos. I built Vertex Core in that crucible, writing code that could adapt when supply chains shifted overnight, when reliable vendors disappeared, when payment methods changed daily. That system literally saved the company. While other businesses were failing because they couldn't track inventory or process payments, we kept running. We went from near death to profitability in 18 months, and Vertex Core was the engine that made it possible. But Brandon? Brandon saw legacy code that didn't fit his vision of the future. "Excuse me," I said, my voice rougher than usual. I hadn't spoken up in a meeting in months. Every head in the room turned to look at me. "That infrastructure processes 87% of our vendor transactions. You eliminate that module and you're not pivoting, you're committing corporate suicide." Brandon turned to me with that look. You know the one. The expression guys like him perfect while listening to business podcasts at double speed during their morning jog. He looked at my gray hair, my faded polo shirt that Jennifer had bought me for Christmas 2 years ago, then checked his Apple Watch like my existence was wasting his precious time. "And you are?" he asked, playing dumb. He knew exactly who I was. I was the guy whose salary made the CFO wince during budget meetings, but who nobody had the guts to fire because when things broke at 2 a.m. on a Sunday, they needed me to fix them. "Michael Hayes," I said, keeping it simple. "I built the foundation you're trying to demolish." Brandon chuckled, this wet, patronizing sound that made my skin crawl. "Right, Michael. I appreciate what you accomplished back in the day, but we're not running a technology museum here. We're engineering the future. And frankly, your monolithic approach is creating dependencies. We need agility. We need scalability. We don't need whatever this legacy situation is." The word legacy hung in the air like a bad smell. The other engineers stared at their laptops, terrified. They knew what was coming. They understood I wasn't just the architect of our systems. They knew I wasn't even technically an employee anymore, but Brandon was too busy admiring his reflection in the conference room windows to do his homework. See, back in 2009, when this company was bleeding money and facing 2 federal lawsuits from vendors we couldn't pay, they couldn't afford my consulting rate. I was an independent contractor charging $200 an hour, which made the accounting department weep actual tears. The company was maybe 8 weeks from filing Chapter 11, and they needed someone who could build systems that worked when everything else was falling apart. So my lawyer, Rachel Pierce, a sharp woman who works out of a converted warehouse downtown and charges by the quarter hour, came up with a different deal. She'd handled IP negotiations for defense contractors and knew how to structure agreements that protected both parties. I didn't sign an employment contract. I signed a licensing agreement. I incorporated my own company, Hayes Technology Solutions LLC, and I licensed the Vertex Core platform to them. Think of it like leasing a car. You don't own the vehicle, you just pay for the right to use it. And like any smart landlord, I kept the master keys. The beauty of the arrangement was that it solved their cash flow problem while protecting my intellectual property. They got immediate access to the system they needed to survive, and I got guaranteed annual payments that were smaller than my consulting rate but more predictable. It was a win-win, except nobody bothered to explain the details to hotshot MBAs who showed up 15 years later. Brandon didn't know any of that. He saw a 48-year-old guy with gray temples and assumed I was some legacy hire from the old days, dead weight he could cut to make room in the budget for 3 fresh college grads who'd work for peanuts and stock options. He thought he was firing an outdated employee. He didn't realize he was trying to evict the property owner. "Okay, Brandon," I said, leaning back in my chair, the plastic groaning under my weight. "You're the boss. Agility, scalability. Got it." He smirked, turning back to his meaningless diagram. The slides looked like they came straight from a McKinsey presentation template. "We're going to start phasing out the legacy modules immediately. HR will be conducting some organizational restructuring to support the new vision." Restructuring. Corporate speak for firing everyone who actually knows how things work so you can hire cheaper replacements who'll take months to figure out what the veterans already understood. I didn't argue. I didn't throw my coffee at him, though the temptation was strong enough to make my hand shake. I just sat there watching him lecture about synergies and optimization while mentally checking my phone calendar. My licensing contract with Vertex Corporation renewed annually unless contested. The next payment was due in 8 days. Section 4 of my contract was crystal clear about what happens if the client attempts to modify, reverse engineer, or compromise the integrity of the licensed technology without authorization. And Section 6? Section 6 was what Rachel Pierce called the nuclear option. Brandon wrapped up his presentation with a "let's execute" team and marched out, probably to drink a protein shake and practice his next PowerPoint in the mirror. I stayed put, finishing my cold coffee while the other engineers filed out quietly. Nobody made eye contact. In corporate America, getting fired is contagious. stand too close to the victim, and management might decide you're part of the problem. Justin Martinez, one of the junior developers I'd trained not to accidentally wipe production databases, lingered by the door. Justin was 24, fresh out of a coding boot camp, smart enough to learn, but green enough to still believe that hard work and loyalty mattered in corporate politics. I'd spent hours teaching him how our systems actually worked, not just how they were supposed to work according to the documentation. "Michael," he whispered, glancing around to make sure we were alone. "You okay? Brandon's been asking HR about your compensation package. I think he's going to cut you." I crushed my coffee cup and tossed it in the recycling bin with a perfect arc. "Don't worry about me, Justin. Just do yourself a favor. If you see me walking out with a box later this week, don't offer to help carry it. Just get back to your desk and make sure your LinkedIn profile is current." He looked confused, maybe a little hurt that I wasn't more upset. Kid didn't understand yet that when you've been in the trenches as long as I had, you don't panic when the amateur pulls the pin on a grenade. You just note the time and start calculating casualties. I walked back to my desk, well, my designated workspace, technically, and logged into my private administration console. Not the company one with all the monitoring and access logs, but the one hosted on a secure server in Iceland that costs me $75 a month and operates under Scandinavian privacy laws. Brandon wanted a revolution. He was about to get an education in the difference between disruption and destruction. The isolation started subtle, like mold growing behind drywall. First, calendar invites began vanishing from my schedule. The weekly architecture meeting disappeared without explanation. Then strategy planning sessions. I found myself sitting at my desk, listening to muffled discussions from the glass conference room 20 feet away, watching Brandon gesture at whiteboards that I used to control. Through the glass, I could see Brandon performing his presentations like some kind of corporate theater. He was erasing my diagrams, complex flowcharts showing how data moved through our systems, built from years of understanding what actually worked versus what looked good in meetings. He replaced them with buzzwords like holistic integration and platform-agnostic mindset. It's fascinating how quickly you become invisible in corporate America. 15 years of 90-hour weeks during crises. 15 years of being the guy who woke up at 2 a.m. to patch critical vulnerabilities so the CEO could sleep soundly in his lakefront house. 15 years of missing Ashley's school plays and Jordan's baseball games because some server decided to have a nervous breakdown during family time. Suddenly, I was a ghost haunting my own workplace. People I'd shared countless lunch conversations with for years started avoiding eye contact in the hallway. They could smell termination on me like some kind of corporate disease. In their world, if you stood too close to someone getting fired, management might decide you were part of whatever problem they were solving. Then came Ryan Walsh, my replacement. Brandon introduced him Wednesday morning with the enthusiasm of a game show host revealing the grand prize. "Team, meet Ryan. He's our new solutions architect. He's going to be leading the transition to modern infrastructure that actually scales with our growth trajectory." Ryan looked like he'd stepped straight out of a tech conference brochure. Fresh college graduate, maybe 25, wearing pristine white sneakers that had never touched a dirty data center floor. His laptop had more stickers than a teenager's bedroom door, company logos from every trendy startup he'd probably never actually worked for. He came over to my desk Wednesday afternoon carrying an oat milk latte and wearing that eager expression that screamed, "I'm here to change everything." "Hey, Michael, right?" Ryan said, practically bouncing on his heels. "Brandon told me you're the, institutional memory around here. I'd love to pick your brain about the existing systems before we sunset them." Institutional memory, sunset. Corporate speak for old guy who knows stuff we don't want to pay for anymore. I swiveled my chair around slowly, studying this kid who was supposed to replace 15 years of accumulated knowledge. "Ryan, do you know what a race condition is?" He blinked a couple times, processing. "Well, yeah, conceptually. We use microservices architecture for that now, right? Everything's containerized and stateless." "Sure," I said, turning back to my screens. "Stateless. Because the cloud is just magic floating in the sky, not actual hardware sitting in warehouses in Oregon and Virginia that melts into expensive paperweights if you don't optimize your database queries properly. Good luck with that, Ryan." He wandered off looking confused, maybe a little offended. I almost felt sympathy for him. Almost. He was walking into a minefield with a map drawn by someone who thought explosives were just theoretical concepts covered in business school case studies. By Thursday, my access to the development environment was revoked. Friday brought the staging environment lockout. Generic emails. Permissions updated by admin B. Coleman. Each revocation felt like watching someone change the locks on a house I'd built with my own hands. I didn't fight it, didn't storm into Brandon's corner office demanding explanations or threatening legal action. Instead, I opened my personal laptop, my trusty beat-up Dell that held the real keys to the kingdom, and checked the bank account for Hayes Technology Solutions, LLC. It was the 8th of the month. The annual licensing fee for Vertex Core was due at midnight on the 15th. Usually our old CFO, a practical guy named Lawrence, who actually understood that contracts meant something, had it on automatic payment. But Lawrence had been restructured out last month as part of Brandon's efficiency initiatives. I refreshed the banking page, no pending transactions, refreshed again 2 hours later. Still nothing. They were ignoring the payment, probably didn't even know it existed in their rush to modernize everything. I sat there watching the blue glow of my screen, feeling this strange mixture of anticipation and serenity. In their arrogance, they assumed that since I collected a salary, which was actually a consulting retainer disguised as payroll for their tax efficiency, they owned everything I'd ever built for them. Big mistake. I pulled up my copy of the licensing contract, the one I kept in a fireproof safe at home next to our family's important documents. 23 pages of legal language that Rachel Pierce had crafted like a Swiss watchmaker. Clause 3.1, Payment Obligations. Failure to remit licensing fees within 24 hours of the due date constitutes material breach of contract. Clause 3.2, Cure Period. There is no cure period for willful non-payment or unauthorized modification of the licensed software. Brandon had already violated the modification clause by trying to integrate his containerized nonsense on top of my core systems without proper authorization keys. Now he was about to violate the payment clause too. 2 strikes in corporate baseball usually meant you were out, but Brandon didn't even know he was playing the game. I could have warned him, could have walked into his glass office and said, "Hey, hotshot, you're about to default on the software that runs your entire business operation." But then I remembered legacy. I remembered the way he'd looked at me like I was obsolete furniture he couldn't wait to haul to the curb. So I let the clock tick. Monday morning at 3 p.m., HR sent me a calendar invite that made my blood pressure spike and my heart rate settle into that calm rhythm I remembered from my military contractor days when everything was about to go sideways. Subject, brief discussion. Location, conference room, C. Time, 3:30 p.m. The classic Friday firing had been moved to Monday for some reason, but the playbook was identical. Do it late in the day so the target couldn't cause a scene, give everyone else time to process that they'd witnessed an execution, and let the weekend wash away any guilt about destroying someone's livelihood. I started packing my personal items. Not much accumulated over 15 years. Family photos, my lucky multi-tool that had saved more systems than I could count, and a small cactus that somehow survived the fluorescent lighting and recycled office air. I wiped my company laptop with military-grade deletion software. Not because I had secrets to hide, but because I'm thorough about everything I do. One final check of the Hayes Technology Solutions bank account, still $0 pending. Time for the principal's office. Conference room C was a glass fishbowl near the elevators, strategically positioned so everyone could witness your professional execution as they walked to lunch. Brandon was there leaning against the wall with his arms crossed, posing like he was shooting a LinkedIn photo about decisive leadership. At the conference table sat Michelle Thompson from HR, a genuinely kind woman who'd been with the company almost as long as I had. She specialized in apologetic smiles and COBRA insurance explanations, and right now she looked like she'd rather be anywhere else, possibly underwater. "Have a seat, Michael," Michelle said gently, using that tone people reserve for delivering bad news to children. I sat down and placed my manila folder on the table. Brandon eyed it suspiciously, probably thinking it contained performance reviews or customer testimonials I planned to use as evidence for keeping my job. "Michael," Brandon started, not bothering to let Michelle handle the formal termination process. "We've been conducting a comprehensive evaluation of team composition, and as we transition toward our high-velocity cloud-native operational paradigm, we've determined that your skill set doesn't align with our organizational trajectory." "Trajectory," I repeated slowly, nodding like I was absorbing this wisdom. like a rocket ship aimed directly at the ground. His jaw tightened slightly. The mask was starting to slip. "We're terminating your employment effective immediately. Michelle has all the paperwork. Standard severance package, 4 weeks pay plus accumulated vacation time. We'll need your badge and laptop returned today." Michelle slid a stack of documents across the polished table. "We also need you to sign this non-disclosure and non-disparagement agreement to receive the full severance package," she added, looking uncomfortable with the whole situation. I didn't touch the papers. Instead, I looked directly at Brandon. "Just to be absolutely clear, you're terminating our professional relationship completely? No consulting arrangement, no transition period, clean break?" "That's exactly what terminated means," Brandon snapped, his professional veneer cracking like cheap paint. "The sooner we can move forward with our modernization initiative, the better." "Okay then," I said calmly. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my employee badge, sliding it across the table with a satisfying click. Then I lifted my company laptop from my bag and placed it next to the badge. "There you go. I'm officially no longer your employee." "Security will escort you out," Brandon said, pushing off from the wall like he was eager to get this unpleasantness finished. "Wait just a minute," I said, placing my hand on the manila folder. "We've completed the employment termination, but now we need to discuss the vendor relationship." Brandon's eyebrows knitted together in confusion. "What vendor relationship?" I opened the folder and spun the licensing contract around so both he and Michelle could read the header. Hayes Technology Solutions, LLC Software Licensing Agreement, dated March 15, 2009, with automatic annual renewal clauses. "I don't work for you, Brandon. I never really did. My company licenses the Vertex core technology that runs your procurement systems, logistics coordination, and payment processing infrastructure. The employment arrangement was just on-site technical support included in the premium service tier." Brandon actually laughed, a short barking sound that echoed off the glass walls. "This is ancient paperwork from the startup days when nobody knew what they were doing. Standard intellectual property assignment covers everything you built while employed here. We own all the code." "Actually," I said, tapping Section 4 with my finger, "you might want to read the specifics. All code, architecture, algorithms, and related intellectual property remain the sole and exclusive property of Hayes Technology Solutions, LLC. The client company receives a non-exclusive, revocable license to use the software, contingent upon timely payment of annual licensing fees and strict adherence to usage guidelines." I watched his eyes scan the paragraph, saw the exact moment when the legal language penetrated his MBA-trained brain, but his ego wouldn't let him process the implications. "This is ridiculous," he sputtered. "You collected a salary. That makes you an employee. Employment voids any prior contractor agreements." "Check with your legal department," I suggested helpfully. "I was classified as a 1099 contractor for the first 4 years, then converted to W-2 status for administrative convenience per a specific addendum that your predecessor signed. But the intellectual property rights never transferred. Hayes Technology Solutions still holds the original copyright registration." I stood up slowly, feeling every one of my 48 years in my lower back. "Here's your situation, Brandon. You just terminated your on-site technical support. That's fine. I was getting tired of the coffee anyway, but you've also failed to pay the annual licensing fee that was due a week ago. That constitutes material breach of our service contract." "I'm not paying you 1 penny, Brandon hissed, his face flushing red above his expensive collar. "Get out of here before I call building security." "That's your choice," I said, walking toward the door. I paused and looked back at Michelle, whose mouth was hanging slightly open. "Michelle, you might want to export backup copies of the payroll database. Just a friendly suggestion based on experience." I gave Brandon one final look. "Section 6, Brandon. Have legal explain it to you. Unauthorized use of licensed software following breach of contract results in immediate suspension of all services. You have 72 hours to cure the breach by paying outstanding fees. But since you just fired the only person who knows how to maintain the system architecture, I'd estimate you have considerably less time than that." "Get out of my building," he shouted. I walked out past my old desk, past Ryan, who was frantically typing what looked like random keystrokes, past the break room where somebody had put up a motivational poster about teamwork. The parking lot air felt cleaner than it had in months. That evening, I sat in my home office with a glass of bourbon. Not the expensive stuff, just something honest that burned away the taste of corporate betrayal. Jennifer was helping Ashley with college application essays at the kitchen table. Jordan was in the backyard, throwing fastballs at the tire swing with mechanical precision that reminded me of well-written code. My personal laptop displayed the Hayes Technology Solutions administrative console, green status lights across the board, inventory module active, vendor, API responding normally, payroll gateway processing transactions. The system had been faithfully serving Vertex Corporation for 15 years, never missing a payment deadline, never failing during critical periods, until now. I navigated to the license management panel and updated the enforcement protocol from grace period to strict verification. Then I queued the command that would change everything. Revoke license key VTX-001 effective immediately. My finger hovered over the enter key. Monday morning at 8 a.m., when the weekend transaction backlog hit the system and vendors expected their automated payments, Vertex Corporation would discover that their core infrastructure was no longer authorized to function. They wanted modern efficiency. They were about to learn that some things couldn't be disrupted without consequences. I pressed enter. The next morning, my phone started ringing at 8:03 a.m. The first call was from an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail, then another, then 3 more in rapid succession. I could picture the chaos. Warehouse scanners failing authentication, trucks backing up at loading docks because digital manifests showed blank screens, customer service phones lighting up like a Christmas tree as orders died mid-process. At 8:20 a.m., Justin texted me. Everything's down. Dashboard just says contact administrator. Brandon's running around the server room like a chicken with its head cut off. He actually kicked a rack. Kicked it. I smiled, buttering toast while Jennifer got ready for her shift at the hospital. Everything okay? She asked, noting my unusually good mood for a Monday morning. Just some work drama, I said. I'll tell you about it later. At 8:35 a.m., my phone rang again. This time the caller ID said Vertex HQ. I answered on the 4th ring, putting it on speaker while I watered the small cactus on my windowsill. Hello, I said, voice groggy like I'd just woken up. Michael, this is Brandon. His voice was an octave higher than normal, strained like a guitar string about to snap. We have a situation. The entire system is down. All of it. We think someone planted a logic bomb. Did you leave something running? I don't work there anymore, Brandon, I said, misting the cactus leaves. Remember? You terminated our relationship. I returned my laptop and badge. I have zero access to anything. Don't give me that, he shouted. I could hear chaos in the background. Phones ringing, people yelling, what sounded like someone crying. The error message says license invalid. What did you do? Oh, I said, feigning sudden realization. The annual licensing fee. Yeah, I mentioned that Friday. Did you guys pay the invoice? I told you we're not paying that extortion. It's not extortion, Brandon. It's a contract. And since you didn't pay, and since you fired the on-site administrator, the software reverted to its default state. Which is off. Turn it back on, he demanded. Right now, or I'll sue you into oblivion. Brandon, I said, my voice dropping to that cold tone I'd perfected during my defense contractor days. You're currently using unauthorized intellectual property. My lawyer's probably drafting a cease and desist right now. If you try to bypass the security protocols, that's DMCA violation, federal crime. You look good in orange? There was silence, then muffled voices in the background. I caught the words legal liability and he's right. Just fix it, Brandon pleaded, his corporate arrogance evaporating like morning dew. We're hemorrhaging money, $15,000 every minute. That's a you problem, I said. I'm unemployed now, remember? I have plenty of time, but I don't do charity work for companies that fire me and call my life's work obsolete. What do you want? He whispered. Put Nicholas on the phone. He's in an emergency board meeting. Then interrupt him. Because in about 10 minutes, your automated vendor payment system is going to try processing $3 million in supplier invoices. Since the encryption keys are locked, every single transaction will fail. Your entire supply chain dies by lunch. I heard running footsteps, then a door slamming. 5 minutes later, a new voice came on the line. Deep, authoritative, but currently shaking with barely controlled panic. Nicholas Foster, the CEO who'd bought his lakefront house while I was saving the company from bankruptcy. Michael, Nicholas said, trying to project calm leadership. What's going on here? Morning, Nicholas. Your CTO evicted his landlord. Now he's locked out of the building. Nicholas tried the corporate family routine immediately. Michael, look, emotions are running high. Brandon made an error in judgment. He's young, inexperienced. He didn't understand the complexity of your arrangement. We can fix this. Come back, we'll discuss a substantial raise. I was sitting on my back porch now, feet up on the railing, watching Jordan throw fastballs at his practice net with mechanical precision. I don't want a raise, Nicholas, and I don't want my job back. That bridge didn't just burn, it vaporized. Then what do you want? You have two options, I said, letting silence stretch until it hurt. Option A, migrate to new systems. Brandon seems confident he can build his containerized AI ecosystem. Maybe he can recreate 15 years of architecture in 15 hours. Good luck with that. We can't migrate. We're completely dependent on your platform. Option B, purchase a perpetual license for the Vertex core source code. You buy Hayes Technology Solutions intellectual property outright. You own everything. I walk away. You never see me again. Fine, Nicholas said immediately. How much? $750,000. That's insane, Nicholas exploded. That's highway robbery. That's 1% of the annual revenue my system generates for you, I said calmly. Plus an inconvenience fee for having to listen to Brandon call my work legacy garbage and treating me like disposable furniture. I won't pay it. Then good luck with the migration. By the way, the data export protocol initiates in about 40 minutes if the license isn't renewed. System automatically purges customer data for GDPR compliance. You wouldn't want to retain user information on an unlicensed platform. That would be illegal. You can't delete our data. I'm not deleting anything. It's an automated compliance feature. Privacy protection is built into the architecture. Silence. I could hear him breathing heavily. I need time to arrange the wire transfer, Nicholas said, sounding defeated. You have 38 minutes. I'll send the DocuSign to your personal email. Corporate email's down since the authentication server runs on. Well, you know. I hung up and walked inside. Ashley was at the kitchen table with her Stanford acceptance letter spread out next to financial aid paperwork, calculator in hand. Jordan was asking Jennifer about ice packs for his pitching arm. Normal family problems. Good problems. My phone buzzed with a DocuSign notification. Contract signed. Wire transfer initiated. 20 minutes later, I checked my phone. Hayes Technology Solutions, LLC. Deposit $750,000. Vertex Corp. I typed the unlock command and hit enter. Status lights flickered from red to green across my screen. 2 minutes later, Justin texted, "We're back online. System's booting. It's like Apollo 13 in here." I walked into the kitchen where my family was having breakfast. "Ashley, honey, how much was that Stanford tuition again?" She looked up from her calculator. "About $60,000 a year, Dad. I was thinking maybe community college first." "No," I said, putting my arm around her shoulders. "Stanford it is. And Jordan, we can afford those baseball camps you wanted." Jennifer raised an eyebrow. "Michael, what exactly happened at work?" "I got a severance package," I said, "a very generous one." 3 weeks later, I was sitting in the conference room at Pinnacle Logistics, Vertex's biggest competitor. Their engineering director, a sharp woman named Christine Martinez, had heard rumors about what happened. "Word is you burned Vertex to the ground and sold them the ashes," she said with a grin. "I enforced a contract," I replied. "Strictly business. We could use someone with your expertise and your business sense. What are you offering? Consulting contract, your own terms, plus equity. Help us build something that makes Vertex Core look like a pocket calculator." I thought about Brandon, probably still trying to understand what had hit him. About Nicholas, probably questioning his hiring decisions. About the lesson they'd learned about respecting the people who actually build things. "Deal," I said. That evening, I sat in my upgraded home office, good bourbon on the shelf, watching Jordan practice pitches in the backyard, while Ashley worked on essays at the kitchen table. The old licensing contract hung framed above my monitor, Section 4, the paragraph that had secured our family's future. I thought about all the other experienced professionals out there, getting pushed aside by younger managers who mistake innovation for disruption, who confuse wisdom with obsolescence. We're still here, still building the foundations that keep everything running. Sometimes the most powerful weapon against corporate arrogance isn't anger or confrontation. It's simply knowing exactly what you're worth and having the paperwork to prove it. They can fire the employee, but they can't fire the landlord, especially when he's the only one with the keys to the building. And when some kid in an expensive suit calls your life's work legacy and treats you like disposable furniture, don't get angry. Just make sure you own the keys. And if you have to change the locks, charge them for the privilege.